He looked at her across the stained kitchen table, not with anger, but with a chilling indifference that cut deeper than any knife. "You don't fit my future, Caroline," he said, checking his watch like he was late for a lunch meeting. "I need a partner who looks like success, not struggle." Grant Sterling thought he was discarding a dead weight. He thought he was trading up. What he didn't know was that the woman he was divorcing, while she was sobbing over unpaid medical bills, had just become the sole heir to the largest private real estate portfolio in North America, and by the time he found out, it would be too late to say he was sorry. The rain in Seattle wasn't just rain that Tuesday. It was a relentless, grey sheet that seemed to want to wash the city of its sins. Inside apartment 4B of the crumbling complex on Pine Street, Caroline Sterling was trying to decide if she could afford to turn on the heat. She was 32, but in the dim light of the hallway, she looked 50. Her hands were chapped from scrubbing floors at the diner where she worked double shifts, and her cheap cardigan was fraying at the cuffs. "Grant?" she called out softly. "Is that you?" The door had slammed shut, bringing a gust of cold, damp air with it. Grant Sterling walked in. He looked different. He was wearing a new suit, Italian wool, charcoal grey, tailored to perfection. It must have cost 3 months of their rent. "We need to talk," Grant said. He didn't take off his coat. He didn't ask about her day. He didn't ask about the pharmacy bill for her mother's insulin sitting on the counter. Caroline wiped her hands on a rag. "I made stew. It's not much, but I'm not hungry," Grant interrupted, his voice devoid of warmth. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, final thud. "What is this?" Caroline asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Divorce papers," Grant said. He said it so casually he might have been ordering coffee. Caroline felt the room spin. "Divorce?" "Grant, we're just going through a rough patch. I picked up extra shifts. I can pay the electric bill by Friday. I know things have been hard since your startup failed, but it's not about the money, Caroline. Well, it is, but not in the way you think," Grant sighed, finally looking at her. His eyes were cold, calculating. "I got the job at Archer & Company, senior analyst." Caroline gasped, a flicker of hope igniting. "Grant, that's amazing. That's the 6-figure job. We can fix everything. We can move out of here. We aren't doing anything," Grant cut in sharply. "I am. You're staying here." The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm moving up, Carolyn," Grant continued, pacing the small linoleum-floored kitchen. "Archer & Co. isn't just a job. It's a lifestyle. High-end clients, gala dinners, networking with the elite. I need a wife who can navigate that world. A wife who looks the part," he gestured vaguely at her messy bun, her worn-out jeans, the exhaustion etched into her face. "Look at you, you're tired. You're small. You smell like diner grease and desperation. You don't fit the narrative I'm building." "I smell like grease because I worked 60 hours this week to pay your credit card debt," Caroline whispered, her voice trembling. "And I appreciate the sacrifice," Grant said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. "But let's be real. You're a liability now. I've met someone who understands the industry. Veronica. She's polished." Caroline felt bile rise in her throat. Veronica DeLuca. She knew the name. Veronica was a junior partner at a rival firm. Flashy, sharp-tongued, and known for dating men she could use as stepping stones. "You're leaving me for Veronica." "I'm leaving you for my future," Grant corrected. "I've transferred $5,000 to the joint account. It's all the cash I have liquid." "Take it. Sign the papers. Don't make this messy, or I'll make sure you end up with nothing but the debt." He turned to the door. "Grant, wait," Caroline pleaded, stepping forward. "We've been together since college. I supported you through law school. I supported you when you wanted to start that tech company. I sold my grandmother's locket for your first suit. You can't just— It's a sunk cost, Caroline," Grant said, opening the door. The rain roared outside. In business, you cut your losses. You are a good investment for the lean years. But the market has changed." He walked out. The door clicked shut. Caroline stood frozen. The envelope on the table seemed to pulse with malice. $5,000. That was his severance pay for 10 years of marriage. She was alone, 32, with no degree, having quit to work so he could study, and nothing to her name but a stack of bills and a broken heart. It was the lowest moment of her life. She slid down the kitchen cabinets to the floor, burying her face in her hands, sobbing until her throat burned. She didn't hear the phone ringing. She didn't hear the storm raging. And she certainly didn't hear the knock at the door that would come 3 days later, a knock that sounded less like a visitor and more like destiny. 3 weeks later. The $5,000 was gone faster than Caroline could have imagined. Grant had forgotten to mention that he hadn't paid the rent on the apartment for 3 months prior to leaving. The landlord, a sympathetic but business-minded man named Mr. Henderson, had given her an ultimatum: pay the backlog or vacate. She vacated. Caroline found herself in a cramped studio apartment in the Rainier Valley, a neighborhood she could barely afford. It smelled of mildew and stale cigarettes. She had sold her wedding ring, a modest gold band, to buy a mattress and a hot plate. She was working 3 jobs now: morning shift at the diner, afternoon shift at a laundromat, and cleaning offices at night. She was a ghost, haunting the edges of Seattle, invisible to the people in the skyscrapers where Grant was likely sipping scotch and laughing with Veronica. It was a Tuesday again when the letter arrived. Caroline had just come home from the laundromat, her hands smelling of bleach. She checked her mailbox in the lobby, expecting final notices for bills she couldn't pay. Instead, she found a thick, creamy envelope made of heavy cardstock. It was embossed with a silver crest: Mercer, Sterling, and Tate Attorneys at Law. Her stomach dropped. Sterling? Was Grant suing her? Had she not signed the papers fast enough? She tore it open with shaking fingers. Dear Mrs. Caroline Sterling, née Fairchild, you are formally requested to attend a reading of the last will and testament of Genevieve Gigi Fairchild at the offices of Mercer, Sterling, and Tate, located at 1000 Union Square, New York City. A flight has been booked in your name for tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., out of SeaTac. A car will collect you. Attendance is mandatory regarding the disposition of the estate. Sincerely, Stellan Mercer, Esquire. Caroline frowned. Genevieve Fairchild? That was her grandmother. But that made no sense. Caroline hadn't seen her grandmother since she was 7 years old. Her father had had a massive falling out with Genevieve, something about her father refusing to join the family business and marrying a waitress instead. Her father always said Genevieve was a cold, heartless woman who loved bricks more than blood. When Caroline's parents died in a car crash 10 years ago, Genevieve hadn't even sent flowers. "Why now?" Caroline whispered to the empty lobby. "And what estate? Dad said she lost everything in the 90s. She almost threw the letter away. She couldn't afford a day off, let alone a trip to New York. But the ticket was enclosed, first class, and inside the envelope was a cashier's check for $2,000 labeled per diem expenses. $2,000. That was 2 months of rent in this hellhole. She told her boss at the diner she had a family emergency. She packed her one decent black dress, the one she wore to funerals, and boarded the plane. New York City. The offices of Mercer, Sterling, and Tate were not just an office. They occupied the top 3 floors of a glass needle overlooking Central Park. Caroline felt intensely out of place. Her shoes were scuffed, and her coat was from a thrift store. The receptionist, a woman who looked like a supermodel, eyed her with skepticism until Caroline produced the letter. "Ah, Mrs. Sterling. Mr. Mercer is expecting you. The boardroom." The boardroom? Caroline was led down a hallway lined with modern art that probably cost more than her entire life's earnings. The double doors at the end opened, revealing a massive table made of mahogany. Sitting at the head of the table was an elderly man with snowy white hair, and eyes like polished flint. This was Stellan Mercer. Sitting along the sides of the table were 6 other men in suits, looking grave. "Please, sit, Caroline," Stellan said. His voice was gravelly but kind. Caroline sat. She felt tiny. "Mr. Mercer, I don't understand." "My father told me my grandmother died while broke. I haven't spoken to her in 25 years. Your father," Stellan said carefully, "was a man of great pride. He refused your grandmother's money, so he told himself, and you, that it didn't exist. It was easier for him to believe she was broke than to admit he walked away from an empire." "Empire?" Caroline blinked. "What kind of empire?" Stellan signaled to an aide, who dimmed the lights. A screen descended from the ceiling. Genevieve Fairchild was not just a grandmother, Caroline. In the business world, she was known as the Iron Lady of Manhattan. She started buying tenements in the 1960s, then commercial blocks in the 80s, then logistical hubs in the 2000s. Images flashed on the screen. The towering Fairchild Plaza in Chicago, the Marina Lux complex in Miami, entire city blocks in San Francisco, a logistical port in New Jersey. "She owned it all?" Caroline asked, her voice barely a squeak. "Privately held," Stellan nodded. "No shareholders. Just her." "Okay," Caroline processed this slowly. "So she left me. What? A house? Some money?" Stellan leaned forward. The room went silent. The other suits held their breath. "Caroline, your grandmother passed away 3 weeks ago. She had been watching you for years. She had private investigators track your life. She knew you married Grant. She knew you worked 3 jobs while he studied. She knew you were loyal, hard-working, and humble. Traits she feared the family wealth had destroyed in everyone else." Stellan slid a thick binder across the table. "She didn't leave you a house. She didn't leave you some money. She left you the Fairchild Trust." He paused for effect. "Caroline, as of this morning, you are the sole owner and CEO of Fairchild Holdings. The portfolio is currently valued at approximately $1.3 billion, with an annual net revenue of $85 million. Caroline stopped breathing. The room spun violently. $1.3 billion. "There is, however," Stellan added, his eyes narrowing slightly, "one very specific condition. A clause she added the day your husband filed for divorce. Her investigators knew about it before you did." Caroline looked up, dazed. "What condition?" "You cannot liquidate the assets for 5 years. You must take the seat of chairwoman. You must run the company. And—" Stellan hesitated, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. "You must do so under your maiden name, Fairchild. But for the next 6 months, the transfer of power must remain a strict corporate secret. To the world, Fairchild Holdings is being run by an anonymous interim board." "Why?" Caroline asked. "Because," Stellan said, "Grandmother Gigi wanted to give you time to learn. And she wanted to see what happens when the people who hurt you don't know who you really are." Caroline looked at her reflection in the polished mahogany table. She saw the tired waitress. She saw the woman Grant Sterling had thrown away like garbage. Then she looked at the portfolio. $1.3 billion, she whispered. "Will you accept, Miss Fairchild?" Stellan asked. Caroline thought of Grant's face when he said, "I need a partner who looks like success." She sat up straighter. She smoothed her cheap skirt. A fire, long dormant, sparked in her chest. "I accept," she said, "and I need a new wardrobe." The transformation of Caroline Sterling, now reclaiming her birthright as Caroline Fairchild, was not a montage of shopping bags and champagne. It was a demolition and a reconstruction. Stellan Mercer did not pamper her. He installed her in a corporate apartment at 432 Park Avenue, overlooking the city that was now partially hers, and hired a team that operated with military precision. "You have the blood," Stellan told her on the first day of what he called the boot camp, "but you do not have the skin. The world of high-stakes real estate is a shark tank. If you bleed, they will eat you. And right now, Caroline, you are bleeding insecurity." Her schedule was brutal. *5 a.m., Physical training with a former Mossad agent named Elias. It wasn't about weight loss. She was already frail from stress. It was about posture, presence, and learning how to occupy space. "Shoulders back," Elias would bark. "Walk like you own the concrete beneath your feet. Because you literally do." *8. AM. Financial Literacy with Dr. Aris Thorne, a retired Wharton professor. He didn't teach her theory. He taught her war. They dissected balance sheets of her competitors. They analyzed the acquisition strategies of BlackRock and Vanguard. Caroline realized that her grandmother, Gigi, hadn't just bought buildings. She had bought leverage. *1. PM. Strategic Management with Renata Bliss, a crisis manager who had cleaned up scandals for senators and CEOs. Renata taught Caroline how to speak without saying anything, how to listen without revealing emotion, and how to kill a negotiation with silence. *6 p.m. Image consulting. This was the most painful part. They cut her hair. The long, straggly brown waves she had hidden behind for years were sheared off into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed her jawline. They dyed it a rich, dark chestnut that caught the light like polished mahogany. The cheap cardigans were burned. Literally. Stellan had them incinerated. In their place came armor. Not just clothes, but statements. A vintage white Chanel blazer, structured McQueen trousers, Louboutin heels that clicked against the marble floors like gunfire. But the hardest change was internal. 2 months into the training, Caroline broke down. She was staring at a complex merger proposal for a logistics hub in Savannah, Georgia, and the numbers blurred. "I can't do this," she sobbed to Stellan, throwing the pen across the room. "I'm a waitress, Stellan. I'm a college dropout. Grant was the smart one. Grant was the one with the vision. I'm just pretending." Stellan, who was sipping an espresso, didn't flinch. He walked over to a safe in the wall, dialed in the combination, and pulled out a leather-bound journal. "Read this," he commanded. It was Gigi Fairchild's diary from 1974. Caroline opened it. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive. October 14th, 1974. "The bank laughed at me today. Said a woman can't manage a commercial skyscraper. They want me to sell the Lexington property to that fool Trump. I told them to go to hell. I will mortgage the jewelry. I will mortgage the house. I will eat cat food if I have to. But I will not sell. They think I am weak. I will show them I am the storm." Caroline read until the sun came up. She read about her grandmother's fears, her failures, and the nights she cried herself to sleep while the world thought she was made of steel. She realized Grant's intelligence was performative. He memorized facts to impress people. Gigi's intelligence was survival. Caroline had survived Grant. She had survived poverty. She had survived the humiliation of being discarded. "I am the storm," she whispered to herself. The next morning, she walked into the boardroom where Stellan and the trustees were waiting. She was wearing a blood-red dress and the diamond earrings Gigi had worn to the 1985 Met Gala. "The Savannah deal," Caroline said, her voice dropping an octave, steady and cool. "We reject the merger. The logistics hub is undervalued by 12%. We buy out the minority partners instead. Hostile takeover if necessary. Leverage the liquidity from the San Francisco sale." Stellan smiled. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile. "Welcome to the game, Miss Fairchild." 6 months had passed since the divorce. In Seattle, Grant Sterling was living what he thought was his best life. He had moved into a penthouse in Belltown with Veronica. He drove a Porsche Panamera on a lease he could barely afford, but appearances were everything. At Archer & Co., Grant was considered a rising star, mostly because he was ruthless. He had no qualms about evicting grandmothers or exploiting zoning loopholes. But he was hungry for the big kill, the deal that would make him a partner. Grant, his boss, Preston Archer, called him into the glass-walled office. Preston was a man who smelled of expensive cologne and old money. "We have a problem, and an opportunity." "Name it," Grant said, adjusting his silk tie. "The Fairchild Docks in Brooklyn," Preston said, pointing to a map. "It's 50 acres of prime waterfront rot. We want to turn it into the Nexus. Luxury condos, tech offices, a marina. It's a $4 billion project." "Fairchild Holdings owns it," Grant said. "Old money. Very private." "Gigi Fairchild died recently, didn't she?" "She did," Preston nodded. "And that's the opportunity. The estate is in transition. Rumor has it an interim board is running things while the heir, some distant cousin or something, nobody knows, gets settled. We think they're weak. We think they'll sell for a quick cash injection." "I'll get the meeting," Grant promised, his eyes gleaming. "It's not just a meeting, Grant. It's the Gilded Horizon Gala in New York this weekend. Fairchild Holdings bought a table. The interim director is supposed to be there. I want you to go. Charm them. Dazzle them. Get them to agree to a sit-down. If you land the Fairchild Docks, you're partner by Christmas." Grant grinned. This was it. He went home to tell Veronica to pack her best dress, the Gilded Horizon Gala, the Plaza Hotel, New York City. The ballroom was a sea of velvet, diamonds, and black ties. It was the kind of event where billionaire tech moguls rubbed shoulders with European royalty. Grant entered with Veronica on his arm. Veronica looked stunning in emerald green, but her eyes were darting around the room, scanning for people more important than Grant. "Okay," Grant muttered. "Target is the Fairchild table. Table 12, near the front." They navigated the crowd. Grant felt powerful. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than the car he used to drive when he was with Caroline. God, Caroline, he thought fleetingly. She's probably still scrubbing grease off that diner floor. The thought made him feel superior, validated in his choice to leave. They reached table 12. It was empty, save for a few empty glasses. "Maybe they didn't show," Veronica said. Bored. "They're here," Grant said. "Look at the place cards." Fairchild Holdings. Suddenly the room quieted. A hush rippled through the crowd, starting at the grand staircase and flowing outward like a wave. Heads turned. Whispers hissed like steam. "Who is that?" Veronica asked, her voice tinged with jealousy. Grant turned. Descending the staircase was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of moonlight and danger. She wore a gown of shimmering silver that clung to her frame like liquid mercury. Her dark hair was cut in a sharp, chic bob. Her lips were painted a deep oxblood red. She didn't walk, she glided. Beside her was Stellan Mercer, looking like a bodyguard. The woman radiated an aura of such intense wealth and power that people naturally parted to let her through. She held her head high, her eyes scanning the room with a look of bored amusement. Grant stared. His mouth went dry. There was something about the curve of her jaw, something about the way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "She looks familiar," Grant whispered. "Please," Veronica scoffed. "You don't know anyone with that kind of money. That dress is a custom Givenchy. It's worth more than your life insurance." The woman reached the bottom of the stairs. A waiter offered her a glass of champagne. She took it, her fingers long and manicured, no longer red and chapped. Grant watched, mesmerized, as she moved toward table 12, his target. "That's her," Grant said, adrenaline spiking. "That's the Fairchild rep. Come on." He pulled Veronica forward, intercepting the woman just as she reached her table. "Excuse me," Grant said, putting on his best Salesman of the Year smile. He extended a hand. "Grant Sterling, senior analyst at Archer & Company. We have some mutual interests in Brooklyn." The woman stopped. She turned slowly to face him. Up close, she was breathtaking. Her skin was luminous. She smelled of jasmine and crushed currency. She looked at Grant's outstretched hand, then up at his face. Her expression was unreadable. It wasn't anger. It wasn't recognition. It was the way a human looks at an insect. "Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was smooth, cultured, devoid of the hesitation he remembered in his ex-wife. But the timbre, It sent a shiver down his spine. "Have we met?" Grant asked, his confidence faltering for a split second. She smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "I don't believe you've had the pleasure of meeting the new me. I am C.J. Fairchild, chairwoman of the board." She didn't shake his hand. Grant withdrew his hand, awkwardly adjusting his cuff. "My apologies. Miss Fairchild. I assumed you were just a representative." "I am the decision-maker," she corrected him softly. She glanced at Veronica, looking her up and down with a clinical detachment. "And this is?" "Veronica DeLuca," Veronica said, stepping forward, trying to assert dominance. "I'm a junior partner at—" "I didn't ask for your resume." CJ cut her off, bored. She turned her eyes back to Grant. They were eyes he knew, hazel eyes with flecks of gold. But they used to be warm, pleading eyes. Now they were hardened glass. "It can't be," Grant thought. "It's impossible." "You mentioned Brooklyn," CJ said. "The docks?" "Yes," Grant scrambled to recover. "We have a vision for the property, a revitalization project. We'd love to present a formal offer. Archer & Co. is prepared to be very generous." CJ took a slow sip of her champagne. She held his gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Generous," she repeated. "I find that men who talk about generosity usually want something for nothing." Grant laughed nervously. "I assure you, our offer reflects the fair market value." "I'm sure it reflects what you think is fair," she said. "Tell me, Mr. Sterling, do you treat all your investments with such disposability? Or do you only discard the ones you think have lost their value?" Grant froze. The color drained from his face. The specific phrasing, discard, value, it echoed the words he had said in that rainy kitchen. She took a step closer. She was wearing heels that made her almost eye level with him. "You may present your offer," she whispered, leaning in so only he could hear. "Come to my office on Monday, 10 a.m. "But Grant?" "Yes?" he choked out. "Don't bring the girl." She flicked a glance at Veronica. "She doesn't fit the narrative." With that, C.J. Fairchild turned her back on him and sat down at her table, signaling for the waiter to refill her glass. Grant stood there, trembling. "What a bitch!" Veronica hissed, grabbing his arm. "Who does she think she is?" Grant didn't answer. He was staring at the back of the woman's neck. There, just below her left ear, was a tiny, faint scar. A scar from when she was 6 years old and fell off a swing. A scar he had kissed 1,000 times. "Oh my God," Grant whispered, the room spinning around him. "Caroline." Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. Grant Sterling stood in the elevator of the Fairchild building, watching the numbers climb. 40, 50, 60. His palms were sweating against the leather of his briefcase. He had spent the entire weekend manic. He had stalked the internet, trying to find proof of Caroline's inheritance, but the Fairchild Trust was a fortress of privacy. There were no photos, no press releases, just the terrifying reality of what he had seen at the gala, the scar on her neck, the familiar cadence of her voice, wrapped in a terrifying new power. The elevator doors pinged open on the 70th floor. The reception area was not an office. It was a sanctuary of intimidation. Minimalist, cold, with walls of floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Hudson River. "Mr. Sterling," the receptionist said without looking up. "Miss Fairchild will see you now." Grant walked down the long corridor. His footsteps were swallowed by the plush carpet. He entered the corner office. Caroline was sitting behind a desk that looked like a slab of obsidian. She didn't stand up. She was typing on a laptop, wearing a sharp navy blazer and glasses he had never seen before. Stellan Mercer stood by the window, silent as a statue. "Sit," Caroline said, not breaking her typing rhythm. Grant sat. The chair was lower than hers, a classic power play. "Caroline," Grant started, his voice cracking slightly. I don't know where to begin." Caroline stopped typing. She slowly closed the laptop. She took off her glasses and set them down with a deliberate click. "You can begin by addressing me as Miss Fairchild," she said. This is a business meeting, Grant. You requested it. You have 10 minutes before I have a call with Tokyo. Pitch me the Brooklyn deal." "Stop it," Grant said, leaning forward, trying to summon the dominance he used to wield over her in their kitchen. "Drop the act. It's me. It's your husband." "Ex-husband," she corrected, "and the ink is very dry." "I know it's you," Grant insisted. "I saw the scar. I know you inherited Gigi's money. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me walk out?" Caroline let out a short, dry laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor. "Let you? You threw $5,000 at me and told me I smelled like grease. You didn't walk out, Grant. You discarded me like a broken appliance. I was under pressure," Grant pleaded, switching tactics to victimhood. "The startup failed. I was drowning. I did what I had to do to survive. I thought if I let you go, you'd find someone better. Someone who could take care of you." "And I did," Caroline said, gesturing to herself. "I found me." She picked up a file on her desk. "Your 10 minutes are burning, Mr. Sterling. The docs." Grant gritted his teeth. He had to play the game to stay in the room. He opened his briefcase. Archer & Co. is offering $2.5 billion for the Fairchild docks. We have the city permits lined up. We have the contractors. It's a clean exit for you. You don't have the experience to develop a project this size. Take the money. Enjoy your life." Caroline flipped open the file. "Stellan, what is the current valuation of the Brooklyn waterfront sector?" "Trending up by 14% this quarter," Stellan recited. "And what is the liquidity status of Archer & Co.?" Caroline asked. Grant froze. "Our liquidity is fine." "Is it?" Caroline looked at a sheet of paper. "Because according to this audit, your firm is over-leveraged on a failed casino project in Vegas. You're bleeding cash. You need the docs to secure a new line of credit from Deutsche Bank. If you don't get this deal, Preston Archer misses payroll in 3 weeks." Grant went pale. How do you have that information?" "I own the building your firm leases in Midtown," Caroline said calmly. "I see the late rent notices. I see the panic." She closed the file. "The offer is rejected. The docs are not for sale. We are developing them internally." "You can't do that," Grant stammered. "It'll take years. You need a partner." "I don't need a partner, Grant. I have $1 billion in liquid capital. I can build a city on the moon if I want to." She checked her watch. "Your meeting is over." Grant stood up, desperate. He was losing the deal, and he was losing the narrative. "Caroline, please," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, Veronica. She means nothing to me. She's shallow. She's not you. We built a life together for 10 years. Doesn't that count for anything? I can help you run this. We were a team. We can be a power couple. Just give me a chance to make it right." Caroline looked at him. For a second, he thought he saw a flicker of the old Caroline, the woman who used to rub his back when he was stressed. "You want a chance?" she asked softly. "Yes," Grant breathed. "Yes, anything." "Prove you're worth it," she said. "Preston Archer is going to fire you when you come back without this deal. If you can survive in this city without his protection, without your title, without your fancy lease, then maybe we can talk. But don't come back to me until you understand what it feels like to have nothing." She pressed a button on her desk. "Security, escort Mr. Sterling out." 2 massive guards appeared at the door. Grant was hustled out, his mind racing. She hadn't said no forever. She had said, "Prove it." He twisted her words, feeding his own delusion. She was testing him. She still loved him. She just wanted him to suffer a little first. He could do that. He could win her back. And once he had her back, he would have the empire. Grant didn't go back to the office immediately. He went home to the penthouse in Belltown. He walked in to find Veronica on the couch, online shopping. "Did you get the deal?" she asked, not looking up. Grant looked at her, really looked at her. She was beautiful, yes, but she was expensive. She was a liability. She was the reason he had lost Caroline. "Get out," Grant said. Veronica looked up, confused. "Excuse me? I said get out. We're done. I want you gone by tonight." "You're joking," Veronica laughed nervously. "Grant, the lease is in both our names." "I don't care," Grant roared, throwing his briefcase against the wall. "Pack your bags. You're a distraction. I'm trying to fix my life." Veronica stared at him, her eyes narrowing. She stood up slowly. "You saw her again, didn't you? The Fairchild woman. You think you have a shot with her?" She laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Grant, you're a mid-level analyst with a leasing problem. She's royalty. But fine, I'll leave. But you're going to regret this." By the time the sun set, Grant was alone. He drank 3 glasses of scotch and stared at the rain hitting the window. He needed a plan. Caroline wanted him to prove himself, fine. But he couldn't wait to survive. He needed a shortcut. He needed leverage. He called his friend Magnus, a divorce attorney with flexible ethics. "Magnus," Grant slurred slightly into the phone. "Hypothetically, if my wife inherited $1 billion while we were still married, but she hid it from me until after the divorce, am I entitled to half?" There was a pause on the line. "When did the relative die?" Magnus asked. 3 weeks before I filed," Grant said. "But the probate, I don't know when the probate cleared." "If she had the rights to the money while you were married, it's considered an asset," Magnus said. "Even if it's inheritance, which is usually separate. If she used marital funds to secure it, or... Look, it's messy. But we could sue for fraud, omission of assets, during settlement. We could tie her up in court for years. Or use the threat of a lawsuit to get a settlement." "I don't want a settlement," Grant whispered. "I want her." "Then use the lawsuit as a stick," Magnus advised. "Terrify her, then offer to drop it if she takes you back." Grant hung up. A dark smile spread across his face. This was the language Caroline understood now. Power. 2 days later. Grant waited outside the service entrance of the Fairchild building. He knew she wouldn't come out the front. He had bribed a doorman $50 to learn her schedule. At 7 p.m., a sleek black town car pulled up. Caroline emerged, flanked by Elias, her security detail. Grant stepped out from the shadows. "Caroline!" Elias moved instantly, blocking Grant's path, his hand going to his waist. "It's okay, Elias," Caroline said, raising a hand. She looked tired. "Grant, I thought I told you to survive. You look like you've been drinking." "I spoke to a lawyer," Grant said, his voice steady. "I know about the timeline, Caroline. Gigi died before I filed the papers. That inheritance, it's arguably marital property. I could sue you for half. I could freeze your assets. I could drag your grandmother's name through the mud in every tabloid in New York." Caroline didn't blink. She didn't look scared. She looked disappointed. "Is that your play, Grant? Extortion?" "It's negotiation," Grant said, stepping closer. "I don't want the money, Caroline, I swear. I just want us. I want you to stop punishing me. Drop the walls, let me in. If you do, I'll sign a post-nup. I'll sign away any claim to the trust. Just take me back." He reached into his pocket. Elias tensed. But Grant pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the cheap gold band she had sold to buy a mattress. "I tracked it down," Grant said softly. "I went to every pawn shop in Seattle until I found it. I bought it back." Caroline looked at the ring that had turned her finger green in the shower, the ring she had cried over. She reached out and took the box. Grant's heart soared. It worked. The sentimental hook. He had her. Caroline looked at the ring, then snapped the box shut. "You bought this back," she said, "with the money you made at Archer & Co.?" "Yes," Grant said eagerly. "The money you earn," she continued, "working for Preston Archer." "Yes." Caroline sighed. She signaled to Elias, who handed her a tablet. "Grant, you really should have done your due diligence. I told you I own the building your firm leases, but I didn't tell you the rest." She tapped the screen and turned it toward him. This morning, at 9 a.m., Fairchild Holdings purchased the distressed debt of Archer & Co. from the bank. I am now the majority creditor of your firm. Grant stared at the screen. The numbers were staggering. I called Preston Archer an hour ago, Caroline said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. I told him I would foreclose on the firm and bankrupt him personally, unless he made one specific personnel change immediately. Grant's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then it buzzed again. Emails. You're fired, Grant, Caroline said simply. Preston terminated you for cause, effective immediately. Something about gross incompetence regarding the Brooklyn deal. Grant staggered back, the velvet box feeling heavy in his hand. You got me fired? I stripped you, Caroline said. No job, no reputation. And regarding your lawsuit threat, go ahead, sue me. I have an army of lawyers who will keep you in litigation until your grandchildren are old. You don't have the money to fight me, Grant. You don't even have a paycheck. She tossed the velvet box into the gutter. It landed in a puddle of dirty water. You wanted a partner who looked like success, she said, opening the car door. Now you have nothing. Welcome to the struggle, Grant. Let's see how well you fit the narrative now. She got in the car. The door slammed shut. The black vehicle sped away into the rainy New York night, leaving Grant Sterling standing on the curb, jobless, alone, and completely destroyed. But the story wasn't over, because a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. And Grant Sterling was not done. Grant Sterling did not disappear quietly. Men like him never do. They fester. 2 weeks after being fired, Grant was evicted from the Belltown penthouse. Veronica didn't just kick him out. She had the locks changed while he was at a bar and left his clothes in garbage bags in the lobby. She also left a note. I only date winners. Good luck with the struggle. The irony was not lost on him. It tasted like bile. Grant moved into a motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed incessantly and the sirens never stopped. His Porsche was repossessed. His credit cards were frozen. He was living on cash withdrawals he had made before the accounts were locked, watching his dwindling stack of bills with a rising panic. He spent his days in a dark haze of obsession. He taped pictures of Caroline, C.J. Fairchild, to the peeling wallpaper of his motel room. Magazine clippings. Forbes had named her the New Iron Lady. Vanity Fair called her the mystery heiress who saved an empire. In every photo, she looked stronger, beautiful, unreachable. She's faking it, Grant muttered to himself, pacing the stained carpet. She's weak. She needs me. She's just trying to hurt me. He decided he needed ammunition. If he couldn't sue her, he would destroy her reputation. He would prove to the world that the Ice Queen was actually a fraud who had tricked her way into the fortune. He drove his rented sedan to the old diner where Caroline used to work, the Rusty Spoon. He hadn't stepped foot inside in 5 years, even though Caroline had worked there to pay for his law books. The bell chimed as he walked in. The smell of frying bacon hit him, triggering a wave of nausea. "Can I help you?" a gruff voice asked. It was Big Sal, the owner, a man with forearms the size of hams and a heart of gold, for everyone except Grant. "Sal," Grant said, trying to summon his old charm. "Long time." Sal wiped the counter, his eyes narrowing. "Grant Sterling, I heard you got divorced. I also heard you got fired. Karma moves fast." "I need to ask you about Caroline," Grant said, leaning in. "I know she's different now, but you knew her when she was nobody. You knew the real Caroline, the desperate one. Did she ever talk about her grandmother? Did she ever mention a scheme to get money?" Sal stopped wiping. He put the rag down slowly. The diner went quiet. "Scheme?" Sal asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You think Caroline had a scheme?" "She hid $1 billion from me, Sal. She was playing us all." Sal laughed. It was a dark, mirthless sound. He reached under the counter and pulled out a framed photo. It was Caroline, wearing her stained apron, smiling tiredly while holding a birthday cake for one of the busboys. "You see this girl?" Sal pointed a thick finger at the photo. "This girl worked double shifts on Christmas Eve so you could have a new watch. This girl came in here with holes in her shoes because she spent her tip money on your dry cleaning. She didn't have a scheme, Grant. She had a heart, and you broke it." "She's a liar," Grant shouted, drawing looks from the few patrons. "She's a manipulator." "Get out," Sal said quietly. "I'm just trying to find the truth." "The truth?" Sal leaned over the counter, grabbing Grant by the collar of his cheap shirt. "The truth is, you didn't divorce her because she was poor. You divorced her because she made you feel small. And now that she's big, you can't stand it. Get out of my diner before I throw you out." Grant stumbled backward, humiliated. He fled the diner, the bells jingling mockingly behind him. He sat in his car, breathing hard. Sal was wrong. They were all wrong. Caroline was the villain. She had to be. If she wasn't the villain, then he was. And Grant Sterling could not survive being the villain of his own life story. He checked his phone. A news alert popped up. "Breaking: Fairchild Holdings to host groundbreaking ceremony for the Brooklyn Nexus project tomorrow at noon. CJ, Fairchild to make first public address." Grant stared at the screen. The Brooklyn Nexus. The project he was supposed to lead. The project she stole from him. "Tomorrow," he whispered, a plan forming in his fractured mind. "Tomorrow, everyone will see." He didn't want money anymore. He wanted to shatter her the way she had shattered him. He would go to the ceremony. He would cause a scene so big the cameras couldn't ignore it. He would reveal her secrets. He would make her cry in front of the world. And then, when she was broken and weeping, she would finally be Caroline again. And she would need him. The day of the groundbreaking was crisp and cold, the kind of New York day that demanded sharp coats and sharper wits. The Fairchild docks were transformed. A massive stage had been erected near the water, flanked by excavators painted in Fairchild gold. Hundreds of reporters, investors, and city officials were gathered. The wind whipped off the East River, carrying the scent of salt and money. Grant Sterling stood at the back of the crowd. He was wearing his old suit, but it hung loosely on his frame now. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who had stared into the abyss and blinked. On the stage, Stellan Mercer stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stellan boomed, "the chairwoman of Fairchild Holdings, Miss C.J. Fairchild." Applause thundered. Caroline walked out. She was magnificent. She wore a white wool coat that looked like armor, her dark hair blowing in the wind. She stepped to the microphone, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. She looked powerful. She looked invincible. "Thank you," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "For decades, this waterfront has been neglected. It has been a place of rust and forgotten potential. But today we do not just build buildings, we build a future." Grant began to push his way through the crowd. "Excuse me," he muttered, shoving a photographer. "Move." "We are creating a space," Caroline continued, "where ambition meets opportunity. A space that values integrity over profit. Because I learned the hard way that profit without integrity is just debt in a different form." Grant reached the barrier. A security guard stepped in his way. "Sir, you need a pass," the guard said. "I'm her husband!" Grant screamed, his voice cracking. The sound cut through the crisp air. The crowd gasped, heads turned. Cameras swiveled away from the stage and pointed at the disheveled man at the barricade. Caroline stopped speaking. She looked down from the stage. She saw him. "Let him through," she said into the microphone. Her voice was calm. "Miss Fairchild, I advise against—" Stellan started. "I said let him through," Caroline repeated. The guards parted. Grant stumbled onto the open concrete in front of the stage. He looked up at her. He thought he would feel triumph. He thought he would feel power. But standing there, in the shadow of the excavators, with 1,000 eyes on him, he just felt cold. "Tell them," Grant shouted, pointing a shaking finger at her. Tell them who you really are. Tell them you were a waitress. Tell them you scrubbed floors. You're not a CEO. You're Caroline from apartment 4B. You're a fraud." The crowd murmured. Flashbulbs popped like lightning. Caroline didn't flinch. She didn't signal for security. She simply waited for him to finish. "You stole this," Grant yelled, tears streaming down his face now. "You hid the money. You let me leave so you could keep it all for yourself. You're cruel. You're heartless." He fell to his knees, exhausted, his voice breaking into a sob. "You were supposed to be my wife." Silence descended on the docks. The only sound was the wind and Grant's ragged breathing. Caroline stepped away from the podium. She walked down the stairs of the stage. Her heels clicked on the concrete. The crowd parted for her. She walked until she was standing 5 feet from Grant. She looked down at him. There was no anger in her eyes. There was no fear. There was only a profound, crushing pity. "Stand up, Grant," she said softly. The microphone in her hand picked up her voice, amplifying it to the silent crowd. Grant looked up, wiping his nose. He shakily got to his feet. "I was a waitress," Caroline said, addressing the crowd but looking only at him. "I did scrub floors. I worked double shifts at a diner to buy insulin for my mother and suits for my husband. I know what it means to count pennies. I know what it means to be hungry." She turned to face the cameras. "He calls me a fraud because I know the value of $1. He thinks my past is a shame. But my past is my strength. The reason I can run this company, the reason I can see value where others see rust, is because I was Caroline from apartment 4B. Because I know what it's like to be discarded." She turned back to Grant. "I didn't hide the money from you, Grant. I found out about it the day after you left. But even if I had known, do you really think money would have fixed us? You didn't leave because we were broke. You left because you thought you were better than me." Grant trembled. I made a mistake." "Yes," Caroline said. "You did. But I am not going to destroy you. That would be too easy. And quite frankly, you aren't worth the legal fees. She reached into a coat pocket and pulled out a business card. She held it out to him. "This is the number for the foreman of the construction crew here," she said. "They are hiring laborers. It pays $25 an hour. It's hard work. It's cold work. But it's honest work." Grant stared at the card. "You're offering me a job? Digging ditches?" "I'm offering you a chance," Caroline said. "You wanted to be part of the Fairchild Empire? Here it is. Start at the bottom. Build something real with your hands. Sweat for it. If you can last 6 months, if you can prove you have the grit to work without an audience, without a title, without the glory, then come see me, and we will talk about a future." She pressed the card into his hand. "Or," she added, her voice hardening, "you can walk away. You can play the victim. You can blame me for the rest of your life. But if you walk away now, Grant, never say my name again, because the next time we meet, I won't be this kind." "Amazing." She turned her back on him. She walked back up the stairs, her white coat shining like a beacon. "Now," Caroline said, returning to the podium as if nothing had happened. "Let's dig." The excavators roared to life. The crowd erupted into applause, wild, deafening applause. They weren't cheering for the building. They were cheering for her. Grant stood alone in the noise. He looked at the woman on the stage, a queen in her element. Then he looked at the card in his hand. Fairchild Construction. Site laborer. He looked at his soft, manicured hands. Hands that had never done a day of hard labor in their life. Hands that had let go of the best thing he ever had. A tear slid down his cheek. He gripped the card tight. He didn't walk away. He didn't shout. Grant Sterling walked toward the foreman's trailer, took off his expensive jacket and threw it in the trash. He rolled up his sleeves. For the first time in his life, he was going to work. And that is the story of how Caroline Fairchild turned her greatest heartbreak into a greatest empire. Grant Sterling thought he was discarding a liability, but he was actually throwing away a diamond he hadn't bothered to polish. It's a brutal reminder that true worth isn't found in bank accounts or job titles. It's found in character. Caroline didn't win because she got the money. She won because she never lost herself. As for Grant, well, rumor has it he's still out there on the docks, pouring concrete, learning the hard way that you can't build a penthouse until you've built a foundation. What would you have done in Caroline's shoes? Would you have offered him the job, or would you have destroyed him completely? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of revenge and redemption, please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching.